What do you know about wet hops? Whether it's a little or a lot, let's have a chat about them. Another exciting time of the year on the craft beer calendar in the Southern Hemisphere. It's bloody like Christmas time for brewers. So, I'm sitting here on a Tuesday night and I'm going to enjoy this great looking beer right here. This is the 2018 Wet Hop NEIPA, the Hop Haze Heaven from Barossa Valley Brewing Company. It's a wet hop beer, so I feel it's only fitting that tonight while I enjoy this beer, we have a little bit of a chat about wet hop beers. Those lovely little hop flowers that we love so much have been cut off their bines and are ready to be packaged up to be used in all sorts of beers for the next 12 months. Except for those hops that are cut and used straight away. Yep, it's wet hop season. You know that old saying in beer that fresh is best? Well, it certainly rings true for hops. At this time of year, there are brewers lined up at the farm gates of their favourite hop suppliers, just jockeying for position, trying to get a hold of some of those wet hops. That's pretty good. Well, I mentioned that they'd be lining up at the gates, but I'm sort of talking metaphorically. You know, most brewers these days have got arrangements with their hop growers to have them sent out by courier either on the day or the day after they've been picked. So what is a wet hop? Well, it's effectively a hop that's been ripped off the vine, but hasn't been put through that kiln drying process. So it still holds a whole lot of moisture in it. You know, wet hops start to break down pretty quickly because they've got a lot of moisture in them and they start to deteriorate. So more than likely you'll see brewers that are close to hop fills being able to brew with these beers. Apologies to any home brewers watching this video. I completely forgot to say that wet hops are a massive deal in the homebrew community. At this time of year, home brewers are working their industry contacts to see if they can jump on the back of an order for some wet hops or maybe score some leftovers from a brew. It's the ultimate form of experimentation for home brewers at this time of the year, with homebrew clubs all around the world running wet hop beer competitions. Home brewers and commercial brewers alike, beware. Using wet hops isn't a cheap exercise. You know, they have to use around 4 to 5 times the amount of hops in these beers as opposed to using their normal kiln dried cousins. It's worth noting that you can also make fresh hop beers as well as wet hop beers. Now the difference is with the fresh hops is the fact that they've been pulled off the vine in the same way as the wet hops, but then they've been thrown into the kiln, have been dried as full flowers, and that will make them last just that little bit longer. Look, I am generalising here, but for the most part, wet hops can produce slightly different aromas and tastes to their kiln-dried brothers and sisters. Well, what do these wet hops do in these beers? Well, look, typically they impart sort of like grassy and fresh type aromas, almost like chlorophyll-like aromas in these beers that you can't normally get out of kiln-dried hops. One of the things I love about these hops is the fact that brewers get them before they even get to go into any of the labs at the hop producers. So these brewers are getting these hops before they've been analysed as far as alpha acids are concerned, so they don't really know exactly how much bitterness will be imparted from the hop into the beer. So in this case, the brewers have to rely on their expertise and their experience to make sure that they use these wet hops in just the right way. What it means is that each vintage beer, while it's using the same hop, can have some completely unique characteristics, kind of like you might find with red wines. Now this is also the reason why these are just like drugs to brewers. All that experimentation and fun, they just bloody love it. But you have to know your shit when you're working with wet hops, because used incorrectly, they can start to produce some really unpleasant aromas. Kind of like off vegetables if you like, as they sort of start to break down and decompose. But get it right, and those grassy and fresh aromas can really make these beers unique. It's important to note that these wet hop beers aren't your typical hop bombs. They're more subtle and tend to highlight unique characteristics in the beers. So it's certainly a labour of love playing around with wet hops and all their quirkiness. I wouldn't say it was necessarily the best commercial decision to be making beers like this all the time. Which brings me back to this Wet Hop New England IPA from the Barossa Valley Brewing Company. Shout out to those guys for sending me a sample. I feel completely privileged to have received one because they only produced 1,500 litres of this beer this year. Yeah, made with wet cascade hops. The aroma on this beer is kind of like taking a walk through a fresh flower field first thing in the morning. It's just awesome. And the taste? Oh, really nice. It's 5.1%, but it feels really sessionable. You've got sort of like lemony, zesty kind of flavours in there. A little bit of tropical fruit as well, and nothing too over the top as far as bitterness is concerned. If wet hop beers are your thing, I suggest you get down to Launceston on the weekend of April 20th. because that's when they'll be holding their annual Fresh Hop Beer Festival. There's going to be over 25 brewers showcasing their creativity with what they've done with wet hops this year. It's going to be absolutely awesome. I hope you have a great festival, guys, because sadly I can't be there because I'm going to be in Hawaii again. Next step for me is trying to get hold of some of these wet hops for next year and have some fun and experiment in the brew shed and come up with one of my own beers. So if you've got any tips and tricks or any advice you want to give to me, leave me a message. I'd love to hear it. Well guys, I've really enjoyed this Wet Hop New England IPA tonight, and I hope you guys have enjoyed my little chat about wet hops. Hopefully you've learned something, hopefully you can teach me something. But until we talk again in this great big craft beer world of ours, cheers to great beers.